Hello and welcome back for another edition of London Direct. I'm stood on the banks of the River Thames and over my shoulder are the Houses of Parliament, and the UK election is going to be one of the key risk factors for the UK economy next year. I've been speaking to Mike van Dulken from Accendo Markets about the outlook for the UK economy in 2015. Mike, it was really good to see you again.
Likewise.
Let's look ahead at the UK economy for next year. I know the UK's held up as an economy that's outperformed many of its neighbours, but I'm slightly more sceptical. If you look at the actual amount of debt that the UK government has, it's basically the same. I know that its debt to GDP is slightly improved. The labour market is better, but it's created lots of low-paying jobs. Also, wage inflation is low. What's your assessment of the UK economy going forward? Are things as rosy as people are saying?
I think I agree with you in terms of the scepticism. The UK's made good progress. I think there's an enormous amount of work to do. It's very similar to the US. There are patches which people can get very excited about, but there are other parts that just cannot be ignored, such as you say, participation rates just aren't quite good enough. The number of people in jobs, part-time jobs, who would prefer to be working full-time is still very high. So I think next year it's a crunch year, as indeed this was. On the way out of a crisis, that is just the way it is until kind of exit velocity is reached. I think the UK has a lot of work to do. Obviously, an election next year. There'll be a lot of reasons for the different parties to be criticising each other. But of course, don't forget the rising prominence of those who are anti-Europe, and that could really change things across Europe, not just in the UK with the rise of UKIP.
If we just stick with the economic picture for the moment, many are expecting the Bank of England to be one of the first central banks to start looking at raising interest rates, probably around the same time as the Fed. If we take in consideration to what we've just said, especially when they're pushing so hard, Westminster's pushing so hard for people to buy houses, are we really going to see a rate hike next year?
I'm not sure. For sure, it would never be before the election. However, if you look at where it's a bit like the UK versus the US in terms of who's going to dare raise rates first. For me, the number of times the expectations have been pushed out, I see that trend continuing next year. I see plenty of potential things to stick a spanner in the works, and I think maybe early 2016 might be more sensible. But then again, let's not forget, and as they keep communicating to us, when they do raise rates, it will be very slow and very small amounts. However, whichever central bank tests the water first will be a key barometer for how it can be dealt with. I tend to think the US might be first, the UK second, and it may well be that there's quite a delay between the two. And that's having big implications for sterling dollar and the dollar itself at the moment, with the expectations rising.
Let's just finish with the election. It's the big risk event for the UK market next year. How do you think that's going to play out? There's lots of discussions of various coalitions, and what will the impact be on the pound?
If we do see a coalition involving UKIP, I think the pound might struggle a bit based on just the uncertainty, and indeed maybe even in the build-up. That may be worsened by the US moving towards a rate rise as well, which could stymie sterling dollar and keep that as it is under pressure below 160. Could we go to the lows of 148, 142? Come back from highs of 178. So while you've got those opposing forces of the US versus the UK, but the UK has its own issues as well as being in Europe, which is a struggling region. I think the pound might remain under pressure, and while that should help the exporting companies, we have to remember that so many of those commodity hungry companies everything's in dollars anyway, so it's less of a benefit to them.
Well, thanks to Mike from Accendo Markets. We'll be hearing more from him next year, but for now, goodbye.